All right, I guess we will get started. So, just like in the last 2 weeks, quiz, do it whenever you get a chance before midnight. The password for the quiz is query. Yeah, just make sure you get it done before midnight and you're good to go. Okay, so over the last couple of weeks, we've been doing CRUD, right? We started in week 3 with create and read, and then last week we did update and delete. So now you have this like fully functioning application locally on your computer. And I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this term before, but environments. Have you heard of the term environments in relation to programming? Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that you guys have been working on so far in your college career is considered local environment, right? Because it's all being done on your local computer. However, working with the web, you're eventually going to want to be able to take your application and actually move it to the internet in some way so that it can be viewed by the general public, right? And that is known generally, usually, as your production environment. You might have environments in between those two stages, in between local and production. However, for us, we don't really need a bunch of stuff in the middle. We're just going to go from local to production directly. So when coming up with what we're going to do for a production environment, I wanted to make sure it was something that you would definitely see when you leave here. So I took a look at like DigitalOcean and AWS and Heroku, and out of the three of them, the only one that can guarantee that all of you can actually use it is Heroku, because AWS requires you to have a credit card in order to sign up, even though they won't bill you. You still need a credit card to sign up. I know a lot of international students don't have a credit card. Some of you might even be 17. I doubt it, but some of you might be. So you may not have a credit card either. So it can get kind of tricky with AWS. The school does issue you guys a free AWS account. I don't know how you access it or if you have accessed that at any point. Yeah.
So we have accessed it, but I think we just got an email for it. It was for our HTML class.
Okay.
It's expired. Yeah, it's expired?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Cool, we don't have it. Oh, I see.
Yeah, screw that. So I'm going to set you guys up with Heroku, which is completely free. However, that leads us to a weirdness. So MySQL, this extra piece that we require, right? So in order for you to have MySQL on Heroku, you have to have a credit card in order to add the resource. So this comes into play where I work in this industry professionally all the time. So I have rolled a server, put MySQL on it, instantiated 44 databases with all your credentials ready to go that you guys can use for this class. Okay? So you have that all up there. What I am asking you not to do is dump more than 20 gigs of data into that database, or you'll screw everybody else over. It won't cost me anything, but you'll screw everybody else over. And I'll find you. And I don't recommend putting sensitive data in there because it is completely visible by me as well. So just use it for just testing and that kind of thing. If you want your own MySQL database, and that's important to you, I will show you at some point through class, if that's what you want to do, how to add one using Heroku as a resource, and then you can have your own. So you can either use the one that I provide you, or you can roll your own, but you will need a credit card. You might even be able to get away with a debit Visa. You know how some of the debit cards now have the Visa logo on it, and you can use those? You just need something to be able to verify who you are and that you're over 18. That's it. Is anybody here under 18? No? Okay. I had a couple last semester, so never know. Super smart Doogie Howser people. All right, so we are going to learn to deploy, but before we do that, we're going to talk about a very cool thing called Git. Now, I know you guys, some of you have had Git discussions in other classes, and I don't know if it's the same experience that the Thursday's class had with it. Thursday's class told me that they started the class, they spent 20 minutes trying to figure out Git, and then the teacher abandoned it and moved on. Was that your experience too?
Our teacher kind of went through the Git and Git Kraken and made us combine accounts that way.
Okay, but you guys use Git Kraken.
Yeah.
Okay. We're not going to use Git Kraken. We're going to do it the proper way with the command line tool. And I'm going to show you how through the command line tool, in order to push your code up, add new remotes, stuff like that, only because Git Kraken isn't free. There's a free tier, but it's not free, right? You want to be able to use as much stuff in your tool assembly line that's free as possible. All right. Lower this stupid thing. So let's talk about version control and what version control is, because that is what we're using. That's what Git is. So version control, you can kind of consider like it's a time machine for your files, right? It's not even necessarily just code. There's people that will write books and use Git for writing books because it maintains a history of the changes that you have made in the code or writing or whatever it is that you're working on. It maintains a history, allowing you at some point, if you've made a mistake, to go back in time to a different point where you were happy with your code or your book or your graphic or whatever it is you were working on, and you can roll back your changes to that point. The cool thing about version control is instead of taking an entire copy of your application, your book, your graphic, it takes only the binary changes that have occurred between point A and point B, which means it's only storing micro changes inside data. This is awesome because it means you're not storing, entire duplicates of data, right? So you're not storing, like, could you imagine working on the next Windows, like Windows 11? And those guys use Git, right? Microsoft bought GitHub. So you're using Git. Think about how big Windows is, right? Like, it takes up a full 4 to 8 gigs, depending on all the features you add, all the plugins, everything else, like all those extra pieces. It takes up a lot of space. They're working on this code, and much of it is uncompiled, right? That's the other thing to consider. And it's all sitting in Git history. They don't want entire 8 gig duplicates being shoved up into Git, because that would cost them a fortune, right? But with Git, you actually are only saving just the micro changes, just, a few hundred kilobytes here and there, or maybe a meg here and there, but just a very small amount of data. The big thing about Git that I don't think the college pushes as much as it should, if you decide to become actually literally any type of software engineer, web developer, anything like that, the bare minimum that you need to know, even going to your co-op or anything out in the industry, is how to push code to GitHub or some sort of online remote repository and how to use Git. It's like a flat out requirement. And the reason is because it's a way for senior developers to be able to manage junior developers or intermediate developers' code properly so they're not breaking their production applications. Okay? We're not going to get into the total sophistication of GitHub. I'm not going to teach you how to do pull requests. I'm not going to teach you how to create your own branches and stuff like that. Unless we have time later in the semester, or if I get you again for the advanced mean stack class, then you will learn how to do that. But for the most part, I will teach you how to push and pull. What I would recommend is that once you understand these fundamental concepts of push and pull, that you go and learn how to merge, how to create branches, how to do other things in Git, and get yourself just using Git. And the best way to do that is every assignment you do in school, force yourself to use Git to be able to manage that project or whatever it is you're doing. GitHub comes in 2 flavors as well, private and public. So you don't necessarily need to have your code public to the rest of the world. Obviously, you guys are working with other students, you're working on projects and stuff, and your code is sensitive. So you can use private repositories. The one benefit to Microsoft buying GitHub is we don't have to pay for those anymore. They're now free. But yeah. So often GitHub is confused with Git, but these are slightly different. Git is the application you use for managing your code on your local machine. So this is how you manage your repositories. That's locally, right? So Git is local. GitHub is an online or a remote repository where you can take a copy of your code changes and put them into the cloud. So that way you have, a backup of all of your Git stuff. That's one good reason for it. The other good reason is for working with other people in a group collaboratively, right? You can all basically access the same Git repo and pull code, make changes, and work on the same project. Something that I encourage you to do when you're working on your project in this class is to make sure you have a GitHub account that all of you are kind of pushing and pulling from. Okay, you can set up a repository under one of you and then invite the others as team members. And I'll show you how to do that if you want to do that. All right. Any questions so far? No? Cool. So there's a lot of instructions, and I've allocated the whole 3-hour class for this. In the slight off chance that we bullet through this and we're done in the first hour and a half, I do have more stuff that we can work on. I have validation, sanitization, and normalization, which is more code related. But I have found that 3 hours is just barely enough to get through this because there's usually a lot of issues that occur. So we'll do our best to get through the whole 3 hours, and hopefully we won't have too many issues. The fact that you guys have already set up GitHub is already kind of a good thing because you already have online repositories. So we'll just log into them, that kind of thing. For the rest of you, does anybody not have Git or has never heard of Git? You don't have it? Okay. So let's start with the first piece that we're going to need to do, which is GitHub itself. We all need a GitHub account. So if you go to github.com, let me sign out so we're looking at the same thing. And I have multiple GitHub accounts because I have my personal one, my business one, and then my college one. So you can have more than one GitHub account if you so choose. So give yourself a username, give yourself a password. Only do this if you don't have a GitHub account, and then click sign up for GitHub. I have any email addresses I could do this with? I don't have an email address called Laser Sharks. Yeah, I need a burnable email. I do have some burnable emails. So just follow through the instructions. Oh, password. It's going to come down and ask you to verify your account. Just let it verify. And flip that in so it brings that up. Make sure it follows the instructions.
It's like, oh, hey, you're Googling it.
Follow what it says. I think it's minimum 8 characters, must contain a number, must contain a capital letter, and probably a symbol of some sort. Most of you already have an account, so why don't we just go ahead and sign in to your GitHub account. So if you already have a GitHub account, make sure you sign in. Even when you're finished, you'll be at this page as well. Yeah, free. Always free. Go check your email and validate your GitHub account. So we're going to create our own repository. The good news is that everybody can actually call their repository the same name because it uses your username as a way to kind of like namespace your repositories. So we can all have a repository called comp-1006. That's totally doable. If you don't want to call it comp-1006, maybe you want to call it PHP sucks ass. Whatever you want, totally up to you. Just create your own repository. Keep in mind you will be handing it in. So if you're like, Sean is a, be careful, because I will see it. All right. Yeah, we're going to make them private. Yeah, we'll make them private. So with private accounts, I'm going to get you guys to hand in your projects with a GitHub link. You have to invite me to your projects. Okay, so it's super important. In other words, well, I mean, it's for your own good, right? Because if you want me to market, you got to invite me to the GitHub link. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. Did you get your email? I don't want to move on until you've got your email. Check your spam as well. Oh, it's in central.
No, I know. I told you that.
For the rest of you, if you want to create a repository right now, we're going to call our repository comp-1006. Oh, right, you can't have. Oh, I already have one. That's why. I'll call mine test. You can give it a description if you want. Check it off as private so that you're used to creating private repository. And you can initialize with a README if you want. Not that it matters because we're going to blow it away. So don't even waste the time. And we're not going to add a git ignore. I will explain git ignores a little bit more as we go through this. Are you at the point where you can create a repository? Nice. Okay, cool. Everybody's on the same page. Let's go ahead and click create repository. Processing. Yay, we have a repository. Now it comes to this page basically telling you how you can go ahead and get this repository to work on your local computer. If you have Git installed on your computer, you can totally do that. If you don't, though, you will need the Git application. So if you navigate to git-scm.com, there's a thing. So it's git-scm.com. And you should see a downloads link just a little further down on the page. If you click that, it'll take you here. Now, if this seems familiar, it's very likely you've already done this before, and you've already installed this before. So I'm just going to be proactive. I'd like you to open up inside. Now, there's some of you with a Mac, right? You're going to need to open up Terminal. The rest of you, I want you to open up PowerShell. So just click on the little search box, type in PowerShell, and don't click it yet. What I want you to do is right-click on it and choose to run as an administrator. And that's super important because the changes you're going to be making to your files require you to have root access. Yes, I'll deal with it in a second. So PowerShell, right-click on it, run as administrator. It's going to prompt you that you're going to allow it to make changes to your device, which is your computer. You're going to do that while I plug in my computer before it does. And boom, there's PowerShell. Right. This.
Yeah, you can mess it up with anything on the set. Like, or now, why not? You boot in your partition and you type the wrong this one, you type the wrong thing, so like that doesn't make sense. This is like, I guess I'll delete your whole laptop.
Adam, are you fear-mongering over there?
A little bit, dude. I got like...
Vince is like, oh,
This is a new laptop.
I'm not going to fry your laptop. Trust me.
Don't type this card and don't do anything like that.
We're not going to do any of those things. Now you got it in your head. You're just going to type it out. All right, so this is what PowerShell looks like. Essentially, PowerShell is like, what I relate it to? Probably computers from my day, right? Before we had a GUI, before we had like mouse clicking kind of capabilities. However, you as web developers And I mean, just programmers in general need to get very familiar with working with a command line tool because you're going to do it often. There's a lot of things you can do in command line much faster than you can do in a GUI. There's also things you can do in a command line that you just can't do in the GUI. It's not possible. Yeah, what's up, bud? What are you opening? If it's already installed over the system. It's not like WAMP where you'll have to like so the directory you're not gonna grab.
Yeah, it was a budget night.
Let's open up PowerShell. PowerShell. Right click on it.
That exists?
All right. So once you have PowerShell over or terminal open, either one doesn't really matter. All I really want to know is whether or not you have Git. So we're going to do Git -- version, I think it is. Yeah, -- version. Yours might be a different version than mine. It doesn't change that abruptly between versions. So. It might be the only one that's available for Linux or for Unix.
I got real angry.
Because we don't have.
Did you get big errors?
It says the term Git is not recognized.
Cool. So then you need to go to this address and download your Git for your.
Is it the client or is it just the whole thing?
Yeah, I just hit download too. If you click on Windows, yeah, it will just automatically start. Now I'm downloading it and I don't need it. Cancel. 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 There. But you should see Git -- version. Did yours come up or give you a bunch of red arrows? Yeah. Click next. Next.
I'm just clicking next one because hopefully it doesn't install
The reason being is that it's going to add Git to your command tab for Windows, and that path updates when you open PowerShell.
You gotta read that account.
You check it. Once that's done, uncheck the view readme if you don't want all the documentation to load up. Yeah, just uncheck the bottom line. Yeah, you're done. So open PowerShell as administrator, all right? And then type Git -- version just to make sure it's working.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, you open PowerShell. Just make sure that the install is working. Yeah, you're right. You're not gonna have to. The reason why you need administrative privileges is because the commands that we're using have to be done as an administrator. It's just PowerShell waste of time.
I knew my business right now.
Right click on it. Run as administrator. Yes. We'll get space -- version. -- Hey, we got Git. Anybody else having issues with getting Git version to work? Basically what that's for is because we're not doing branches, we're not going to do something really merging. Because we're not doing merging, you're never going to see the integration. And when it comes time to find this, it installs. Next to you know
And that's what I was something, and I was like, I don't know why I never used that. I think I know the meanings, or it's like, what is that simply?
colon X or colon W to exit them. And make sure you're
My prof was so like, he's like, it's stuck.
Like you better come to it now.
Unless you want to.
Probably don't.
So let's open up PowerShell. You have PowerShell currently running. Did you do it? PowerShell just load the path variables to the first path initialized. So this one currently doesn't have Git, so X out of it. And then open PowerShell. And right click on it, choose to run Git. Git dash dash, sorry, Git space dash dash. R, that's it. Cool. Keep hitting next until it's installed. Do you mind helping her? All right, so we have our Gits. Hopefully everybody has Git. Yes, Lindsay doesn't have Git. Lindsay does not have Git.
This is the only two other like I just don't know which one.
Just next until you get
Yeah, that's what I did. I said, I hope I don't get a virus.
I
You
don't
like
trust
to
like
install,
that.
yeah,
What shot now have access?
Exactly.
Just uncheck the thing so it doesn't open. Perfect. Open up PowerShell as administrator. Close that one. So when you install Git, it actually adds the Git binary to your path. When you first load PowerShell, Git wasn't in the binary. You either have to reload the path, or trickier than just killing it. Version. Yay! Oh, awesome.
We got 2.25.
Next. Until you get to install. When it's done, kill it.
Yeah.
When this is done, it will add the Git binary to your Windows tabs. If you open PowerShell, you should be able to type in Git space dash dash version.
What did you just do?
Yeah, when did that? I used to remember that. Windows X, you super fast.
They said that Git baked it.
There you go. I'm a hockey master. Is it working?
He's still on here, right? It's just a little.
Right.
Very rare.
Windows X. Windows X. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Git space dash dash version. Did it work? Awesome. Sweet. All right. So we all have Git. That doesn't mean that this is all going to run smoothly. I always like to think it will. What I will suggest right off the bat, because a lot of people do this to me, stick with PowerShell. Do not use Git Bash unless you have previous Bash experience. If you don't know what Bash is, stay the hell out of Git Bash. Just use PowerShell for now. Okay? Cool. Those of you that have experience with terminals, Git Bash is a piece of garbage. Go use Fish if you're on Windows. Okay? Anyways, let's get back to this. So we've got PowerShell. Leave PowerShell open. I'm going to jump back to our lesson plan here. I'm going to go over to my GitHub, right? And I want to teach you how to get to the repositories. So right now you're at the repository. What I want you to do is click on your username in the top left corner here. Okay, so that's going to kick you back out to your actual user home. So I'm going to click on my username. I'm now in here. In order to view the repositories that I have, there's a tab here called repositories, and I can click on that. This is actually a good way to show it because I've got 27 repositories in here. So I can filter down. If you want to find your repository, you can start to type it out. You figure this would like automatically filter. Maybe it is filtering. Yep, there it goes. Filters it down for me. I can now click the link for the repository, and that will take me to the repository page. So if you lose your repository and you're in Git, just click on your username, go all the way back out, click on repositories, and go back in that way. There are two different ways we can connect to our repository. We can use SSH, which is definitely the preferred, more secure way to do it. That's what we use at work. However, just for simplicity, we're going to use the secure HTTP method, which is just a URL, basically. You can either highlight it and copy it, or you can just click the little handy button they gave you to copy it. All right. Open up File Explorer. Navigate to your WAMP directory or wherever your web files are held. So mine are under my C drive. Most of you will be under the same thing. C, WAMP64, www, com1006 is where they are. The other way to get there quickly is open up WAMP. And once the W loads, you can click on the W, come on, and click on www directory, and that will take you to the same location. And then just go to comp1006. Whatever it takes to get to the Apache serve directory. Those of you on Mac, you guys using NAMP, so you have to go to Applications, NAMP. I'm sure you're kind of used to this point getting there. Yeah. Just like we did last week, we're going to duplicate the previous week's lesson and rename it to lesson 5. Okay, so I'm going to click on lesson 4. I'm going to hit Control-C, Control-V to paste. If you're on a Mac, you can just hit Command-Shift-D, and it will do both those operations. And I'm going to rename it to lesson 5. So now it's lesson 5. So I copy and pasted lesson 4 and renamed it to lesson 5, essentially duplicating lesson 4. Are we good? Yeah? You look so exasperated. All right. Yep.
You just made a new folder.
Nope. I copied lesson 4, pasted it, and renamed it to lesson 5. Yeah. So all of our stuff, right, that we did last week is now sitting in lesson 5, and our first step is going to take lesson 5 and push it to our repository online. Okay? We're going to use lesson 5 to do that. In order to do that, we kind of need to be able to navigate to this directory. There's a few different ways we can do that. However, the simplest is to drill into lesson 5, click up in the address bar, And if you did that successfully, you should see the whole path for that file. Hit Control C or Command C, whatever. Okay. I'll walk you through that one more time. I went into the Lesson 5 folder. I clicked up in the address bar, and I hit Control C to copy that. Then I'm going to go to my PowerShell, and I'm going to type in CD space. Okay? CD basically is a command to tell the Windows system to navigate into another folder, and the folder is, go ahead and paste, that folder. So CD into C:\WAN64 www Untitled 6 lesson 5. That's what we're doing. We're CDing into that. I've never actually looked up what CD means. That makes sense. I mean, that totally makes sense. It's one of the few commands that still spreads between Linux and Windows. Some of the other commands don't. That's what PowerShell was supposed to be. It was supposed to give you like this blend. But you can do things like ls to list, but you can't do ls-la to list hidden directories and files. So you get some of it, but not all of it. Also, if you find that your page is getting cluttered and you want to clear this stuff out, Control L will clear the window. And it's just clearing the window, it's not clearing the history. If you scroll down, the history is still above. It just basically shoves you to the bottom. All right. I don't know if you want to write these down. The instructions are on Blackboard as well inside my lesson plan. And not to mention when you create a repository, the instructions are there as well. Step 1 is to initialize this as a brand new repository that we're going to track. This command is only happening local on your machine and has nothing to do with GitHub at all. You, in fact, can use Git without ever using GitHub, and there are a lot of people who do. And because maybe you don't want to push to a remote repository, you have no reason to. You can use Git to manage your code changes, track all your stuff, and work with your code without ever using a remote repository. So these few commands that we're going to type right now are not using the remote repository. They're just happening locally on our machine. First thing I want you to try to see, well, first we're going to do git init. So git init. And that's going to initialize lesson 5 as a Git repository. So we're turning our lesson 5 directory into a Git repository. Hit enter. And if it happens successfully, you should see initialized empty Git repository in C:\. You've also got a new folder called .git. That folder contains credentials and information about your Git repository. In order for us to get this to work remotely, we need to kind of configure some information about ourselves. That information we only ever configure once. We don't have to worry about configuring this all the time. It's just one time. And because it happens so rarely, I completely forgot how to do it. So give me 1 second. I just forgot the command. Give me 1 second. Because you don't do it very often. You do it once, and then every Git repo from that point on will always be done the same way. All right, we want to configure ourselves, our global username, and our global information here. Git init, git status, and git commit. Here it is. All right, so it's git config -- so it's 2 dashes, global space user.name, and then in quotes your name. If you've already done this, it's already there, but you don't worry about it. We'll just overwrite what's ever there. So this will, at the global level, define who your Git username is. Go ahead and hit enter, and you should see no errors, nothing. So git config -- global user.name. Sean McKinnon for me. Please do your name. You'd be surprised. Git config -- global. This is the next one. User.email, and use the email you use to sign up to GitHub. It'll make your life a lot easier. What's that? It doesn't really matter. All it's going to do is when you create commits, it takes that name and applies it to the commit so people know who made the commit. The email is more important because it has more to do with us registering and stuff. Once you've done that, go ahead and hit enter. And again, you should see no errors. There should be no glitches, nothing. Just literally you've added those two pieces of data. It's user.email and then the email address itself in quotes, just to save yourself any headaches. I'm going to teach you the most magic Git function in the world. Git status. Git status gives you information about your repository. If you type in Git status, it tells you a few different pieces of information. Tells you which branch you're on. We're not going to work with multiple branches, but suffice to say that Git works kind of like a tree, and you can create all these different branches to put features into. I talk about it in the notes, but just for time, we'll kind of skip over that. We don't have any commits yet, meaning that we haven't committed any of our code yet. You can commit your code file by file, or you can commit your code all the files at once. You can do it in chunks if you so choose to, and there are reasons that you may do that. Untracked files. This means that Git is currently not tracking this file. This is a directory with 7 files in it. When we go to track it, we'll actually expand all 7 files and start tracking them all. Tracking basically creates a listener that watches the file for changes. When we commit our changes, that gets isolated as a point in time. Every change after that commit becomes new changes. Then when we commit those changes, they get isolated in time. So you see what I'm saying? Every time you make changes, you have to commit if you want to basically take a snapshot of those changes at that particular time. And it even tells you how to do it. Git add file if you want to do one file, but we want to do all the files, so we'll use the wildcard to do that. The wildcard is git add dot. Dot basically says everything in this relative directory recursively. So we'll actually scan through all the directories starting at this point. We'll go through every single directory and grab every single file that is currently not tracked and start tracking them. So git add dot, hit enter, and you should see nothing. No message, no information. Yeah.
When I've opened this, I'm seeing example slash and lab slash. Is there a way to just like commit it down to 1? Or is there...
Instead of git add dot, you would do git add examples.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can just commit both. It's totally fine.
If I was going to just like go to the examples and then the backslash and then it's fine?
No, just examples.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're unsure, you can do git add examples and hit tab, and it should autofill it. Yep. That's fine. So if you get the weird line, end of line warning, just ignore it. It has to do with how Windows records line enders. It has more to do with my code editor adding kind of strange end of lines. It still means they committed. It's just a weird end of line character. So if you want to see if it worked, you can type in git status. And if it worked, it should show you these files are currently tracked. So I've got delete.php, edit.php, form.php, insert notification table, and update, and all of these are currently being tracked. Now I'm ready to commit them. They're tracked, but we're not actually creating a snapshot. We want to create a snapshot in time of these file changes. So to commit them, I'm just going to scroll up a little bit so that you can still kind of see what I'm doing here. We're going to do git commit -m, that's a flag, and it stands for message. You need quote characters in here, and then you give it a message. And because it's our first commit to our repo, we're just going to say init. Or initialize, or whatever. Because it's our first code that we're pushing out, it's just our initial code. Once you've done that, go ahead and hit enter, and it's going to go through, and it's going to take all of that, and it's going to add it as a snapshot commit. And I think it might even give you a commit code. No, it doesn't. I can't remember if it did or not. Yes, it does. Actually, see this E26613B? That is my commit. So I can actually take that code if I want, and I can reset my Git back to that point in time if I need to. The good news is once you push this up to Heroku, or sorry, not Heroku, but GitHub, that those commits remain as a history, and you can actually go back in time and go look at them to see what changes were made, or to go blame somebody on your team for crap they did, which is what we use it for more than anything.
So like it won't show up on GitHub right now.
Not yet. Everything we've done so far is local. That's it. And you can stop. You can stop right there and be happy with that. And then the next time you have code changes, you just do git add dot and then git commit with a new commit message. And all of this is just sitting locally on your machine, and that's totally okay. Yeah. It won't retract files that have already been retracked or have already been tracked. If you want to get rid of those files so they're not being tracked in that particular thing, you can clear your cache. But that's more sophisticated than what we really need. It's rare that you need to do that. We will talk a little bit about that when we deal with git ignore. So right now, if you type in git status, it should say on branch master, nothing to commit, working tree clean. Meaning that you've already pushed changes that you've made, you have no more changes to make, or you haven't made any more changes, so everything is clean. You have a snapshot, everything is clean. Now we want to add this to GitHub itself, and in order to push the files to Git, we need to add our GitHub repo as a remote location. So I can't remember. We already overwrote our clipboard. So jump over to your browser so that you're in your repo and click copy so that you've copied your repo. The URL up here. You just click this little link thing here and it will copy with the address of the location. Or you can just highlight it and copy it if you don't believe it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Which does seem difficult. I don't know. I'm going to trust it. Jump back over to PowerShell. I'm going to clear my screen. It's git remote add origin. Those 4 words are very, very important, by the way. So git remote add origin space, and then just paste in your GitHub link. So git remote add origin, and then paste in the GitHub link. Make sure that you paste in that clone link. I lost so much time doing this 2 semesters ago to find out that 15 students just copied the URL from the top of the page and pasted it in, and I couldn't figure out why they couldn't push or pull, and it had to do that they didn't copy the right URL. The URL you have copied has to end in .git. If it does not end in .git, you didn't copy the correct thing. Does anybody's not end in .git? Okay, I'm trusting you. Hit enter, and you should see nothing. All you've basically done is update the configuration with the new address. To verify it worked, type in git remote-v, git remote-v, hit enter, and if everything is golden, it should show you your repository address with the word fetch and your repository address with the word push. Does anybody not say fetch or push? All right.
So the remote dash v just shows. So I'm just trying to like follow along. Like,
It's basically showing you what commands are currently assigned to your remote repository. So the first one we're going to call is git fetch. So type in git fetch and hit enter. This is going to connect to GitHub. And it's going to fetch any code that is currently sitting on GitHub and bring it down. Unfortunately, there is no code, right? We have no code on GitHub, so we're okay. So we will see nothing. So logically, your next step would be to take your code and push it to GitHub. Yep. Yes. So if it comes up and asks you to authenticate your GitHub, authenticate your GitHub. So log in. Some of you may get that, not all of you, because some of you are probably already logged in. But if you haven't authenticated your GitHub, it's going to come up and ask you to authenticate. Just give you a little window. All you're doing is basically authorizing your access to GitHub from your machine. If you type in git push and hit enter, you're going to get a fatal error, even though it doesn't look like it's fatal. Basically, it's telling you that you have no upstream. It means that you have no way to push your code to GitHub because it doesn't know exactly where you're pushing it. And then it even tells you how to do it properly. Right? It says git push set upstream origin master, but I will show you the shorthand method for it, which is git push -u origin master. So git push -u origin master. Once this is set up, it's actually pretty easy to use after this point. Go ahead and hit enter. It's going to enumerate your objects. It's going to compress them. And then it's going to write them. However, some of you may have gotten an error that says failed to push. Did anybody get a failed to push? So that means that your repository has a file in it and your head on your local is not matching up. So you have to add one more flag. The flag you're going to add is -f. And -f means force push. Which makes me think Git people were like Star Wars nerds. Once you do -f, it should all go up.
It says error.
That's one. That's one. So hit so type in git add space stop. -m.
Yeah, so check it. So git push works.
And then the quotes just give it.
Yeah, it's creating the upstream.
Just type in it. I there. Okay, so now they're all added. Now we'll do git push. And then we have to do that. So here's a trick. original. So the only reason you were getting that is because you had untracked commits.
Oh, okay.
So some areas of the internet are going to talk about the dangers of Git. Git can be very hostile. More in collaboration, though. More when you're working with someone else. It's very unlikely that you'll screw yourself over, but other people will likely screw you over. This -f has two meanings to me. It has force push as one meaning, and then the other meaning is fuck no. If you find yourself typing -f, you need to slap your hand and say fuck no, because you're going to screw somebody over if you're typing -f. What -f literally means is ignore everything in the repository, take my repository changes as if they're God's grace and throw them into the repository and just wipe out everybody else's changes. Yay me! That's a good way to get a punch in the face. So don't do -f, okay? Never do -f. Now the good news is when you work in the industry and you're still at that junior or intermediate level, most times you won't even be able to push code. You'll have to create something called a pull request where your senior will then look at your code and then push your code for you. But in the off chance that you're working somewhere where you're the expert, just keep in mind that if you have to do a -f, it is likely you've done something wrong and you should go look at your code. Because chances are you've made a change and you're about to overwrite a previous change. The good news is that Git will tell you that. You'll wind up with something called a conflict. And it tells you exactly where the conflict is, and then you just go to the code file where the conflict is and change it. That's it. So the 4 commands that I would recommend writing down, I'm going to put them on the screen here. Git Pull. Git Pull will take the current changes up on the repository, the remote repository, and pull them down to your machine. That's the first one. So Git Pull. Git add dot or add whatever the file name is your second one. So that adds your file changes. Git commit -m and whatever your message is. These messages you will find that you kind of get sick of changing the message, so you start writing ASDF and test and stuff like that. I promise you that will bite you in the ass later on when you try to go back in history to remember what you did. ASDF isn't very explanatory. So it's usually a good idea to be as verbose as possible. Okay? Write a good message so you know what your change was. And then when those 3 are done, you can finally do a git push. Now that git push and set the upstream, you only have to do when you first initialize the repository. After that, it's just git push from that point on. So make sure you have those 4 commands. We're going to run them a few times tonight. So not a super big deal. That was fairly painless. It only took us an hour to do that. The first time I taught this particular lesson, it took 2.5 just to get Git working. Yes, super painful. So this is good. We're only within the hour. So we'll take a break, and then we will sign up to Heroku, and I'll show you how to actually connect your GitHub account to your Heroku account. No more FTP, ladies and gentlemen. Your code from your repo will immediately be pulled to Heroku and deployed to the internet. So no more FTP. Yay. All right, let's take a 10-minute break. We don't want to lose this. Okay, so Heroku, no different than like Bluehost or Netlify or any online place for you to store your code and serve it to the internet. It's a server, right? It's a server where you can put your code. It gives you a web server to actually distribute it. It also very kindly gives you a web address that you can then use to give to other people so they can see your code. Okay? The cool thing about Heroku is that what you get from them is a virtual machine. It's a virtual computer. you can actually log into this thing. You can run bash commands into it. You can do some really sophisticated things to it because it is just your machine. But instead of you having to boot up this machine and install Apache Server, install PHP, install MySQL, all that type of stuff, Heroku actually looks at your code base, figures out what your requirements are, and will automatically implement them for you. So for example, I do Ruby development. If I build a Rails application, all I have to do to Heroku is connect it to the Rails GitHub link, and it will auto-deploy my application. It will install Postgres. It will create a Puma server for me. It will automatically install the Ruby dependency, and it will auto-install all of my packages that I require. Does that instantly. Same with Python, same with anything. Really, absolutely anything. Node, mean stack, MERN stack, doesn't matter. It will auto put everything up that is required. Not Postgres, sorry. Not Postgres, not MySQL, not Mongo. Only reason being is because you require a credit card in order to use those database servers. But for the most part, everything else. So when we deploy our code, as long as we have a file at the root of our application that ends in PHP, Heroku will pick that up, know it's a PHP application, and immediately install the environment we require, which is very awesome. However, if we look at our repo right now, so if you go to GitHub and go to your repository, you'll see we do not have a PHP file at the root of our repository. We have a bunch in examples, but we need one outside, because if we were to deploy this right now to Heroku, Heroku's going to look at this and go, yeah, I have no idea what you're trying to do here. So it needs something to tell it how to configure itself. So, I mean, this is good practice for actually pushing and pulling. Let's go into our comp1006 directory, right-click on our lesson 5 file, or folder, I mean, and open it with code. So we're opening the whole directory inside VS Code. The reason why we're opening the whole directory and not just examples is we're going to right-click in here and create a new file, and we're going to call it index.php. And it doesn't even have to contain PHP because Heroku will pick up the file extension. But seeing as how we really don't have any links to any of our stuff, why don't we create a link to the table.php page? So we hit an exclamation mark, and tab fills out an auto page for us, right? That's super handy feature. I'll do that again because it seems like some of you are confused. So exclamation mark and tab. It does the whole page for you. I've showed you guys that before, right? Pretty sure I have. Just gonna format my document a little bit. Git testing. That's what we're gonna call this. I'm gonna create not a head. I'm gonna create a header. Let's try that again. With an H1 called Git testing. And then I'm just gonna create a link that's going to point to examples/table.php, table of countries. Very simple HTML page. Not too much going on. In fact, I'm even going to remove the language because it's not necessary. So now that this change has been made, I can get ready to actually push it up to my Heroku instance. And this is not in our lesson plan. So congratulations for showing up to class. I'm going to show you something a little different. How many of you are using VS Code? Those of you that are not using VS Code, you will have to use PowerShell for this next bit. Those of you using VS Code, congratulations. Your terminal is already built into VS Code. If you press Control and tilde, you can find the tilde character just under the escape key. It will load up PowerShell right inside VS Code for you. Why is this handy? Because when I make code changes, I can now quickly push my code, add my code changes and stuff like that without having to jump back to PowerShell. Control tilde. Your tilde character looks like a wave. It's under your escape key. It looks like this. That's a tilde. What's that? Oh, yeah, we're going to take this whole thing and we're going to push this up to our Git. Yeah. Sorry, was there questions?
I was just going to say on Mac, it's literally control against that command.
Oh, okay. So obviously this is cluttered right now. It's kind of hard to see stuff. So I'm going to hit Control L, which works in there. It's literally just taking your PowerShell and booting it into a nice little frame, basically. That's all it's doing. Yeah. Yes, I can. I can scroll down. I realize we've lost everything. My only complaint, I would say, with this is that they don't let you take this thing and dock it to a different side. It's always at the bottom. I kind of wish you could dock it. That would make life worse. But they don't allow it. You can split it into multiple shells. So that's what this split command here is. It will actually split it into 2 PowerShells if you need that. So our first step is to add our changes. So if you type in git status and hit enter, it will tell you that you have some changes. So untracked file index.php. So it's seen the index.php file we created, and it knows that we've made modifications, and it knows that we need to add those. No worries. I'll do it again. Git status. The other nice thing about this versus PowerShell, much easier to read in here. Color, right? Syntax highlighting, like a little bit, not tons, but a little bit, which makes life a little nicer. Yeah. No, so if you're in lesson 5 where the repository is, you don't. If you're creating a brand new repository, yes, you have to go through all those same steps. So when we're adding our remote, when we're adding in the upstream and all that, anytime we create a new repository, that's when we have to do that. If you're working with an existing repository, which we are now, it's as simple as git pull, git add dot, git push, or git commit, and git push. That's it. Just the 4 commands after this point. So I'm going to add this, and I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to clear it. So git add dot, which will add any changed files. And it doesn't say anything. There's no explosions, nothing fancy. If you want to know whether it worked, what can I use to tell whether it worked? Git status. And that tells me that it's currently staged. That's what that stands for. When you do git add, you're staging your files, getting them ready to be committed. So my file is staged in this nice kind of mint green. I'm going to hit Control L to clear. So now I'm going to do git commit -m, and I'm going to give it a message, adding an index file for Heroku. So nice and verbose. Anybody speak Japanese? I still don't know what Heroku means. I always wanted to know. I guess there's Google, but I just typed it out.
Let's find out.
Always wanted to know. Not that much, but it's been a while.
Yeah. Not enough to actually put effort into knowing. Can I scroll up? Like this way?
Not that one.
This one?
Yeah.
I've done git add dot and then my git commit. I haven't actually committed it yet. I will in a minute. All right, so I'm going to hit enter on Git Commit. And now my stuff is committed and ready to go. If I was to do a git status, my branch would be clean. However, I still haven't pushed my code up to GitHub. So next, Git Pull. Git Pull will take any changes that are remote and bring them down. We have no changes, so it should say already up to date. Whoa, there's a lot of hands. What's going on? Did you do a git add first? Did you do git add first? You didn't do git add. That's why. Yeah. Otherwise, it's git add. Yes. What's up?
It says 0, 0 insertions. Yeah, but
It just means that you had no changes. Nothing's been committed or nothing's happened. So do a git status to see if you have any changes kicking around.
Oh, so Heroku is a portmanteau of Heroic and Haiku, and it's a nod to Matt, who was the creator of Ruby.
That's super sick. That's kind of cool.
It says your branch is ahead of origin master.
Okay, so do a git pull. Oh no, sorry. Do a git commit. My apologies. Do a git commit.
Git Commit.
Did you do a git add? Did we see that? Okay, so do a git commit and then a message -m with a message. ASDF. It's the first 4 fingers, right? Git add them. You have to do a git add. Type in git add, git space add space dot. Enter. Yeah. Now do git commit -m and a message. Yeah. You have untracked files? Yeah, git add. You gotta do git space add space dot. Yeah, you have untracked files.
Oh, yeah. It should be. No, you don't need to anymore.
Enter. Get files untracked. Git space. Commit. COM. Yeah, space. -m.
That's what I was doing. That's why I'm ruling this.
-m is one of them words. Like that. Yeah.
Take a quick one.
So that just took like 3 years of my life.
Whatever you want.
Oh, yeah.
My screen stuck, so I can't move it.
All right. So if Git says to you untracked files, how do we solve that? Git add dot. That tracks the files, and then when we're done that, we can now do our commit message. So anytime you get untracked files, you need to do git add dot. It means that the files that you're listening to haven't been actually added to your tracking. You haven't staged them yet. All right, cool. Did everybody do their commit? Not yet? Need me to show you again? It's done? Like everybody did this? No? I knew it. Yes. No. No, I didn't. Yeah. Okay. So now that that's done, do a git pull. And what git pull will do is reach up to your repository, grab any changes that you possibly have sitting up there, and merge it into your current code base. Okay? I have already up to date, which means there's no changes up there that I don't have down here. For the most part, that should always be the way it is, right? When you start collaborating with other people, this might say other things because they may have made changes and pushed those changes, and then you do a pull, and now your changes need to be merged with theirs. So my biggest suggestion to you starting out is don't work in the same files, okay? Because when you work in the same files, you might wind up with a conflict. All right, now we're ready to git push. Git push is going to take our code and send it off to GitHub. Once that's done, what I would like you to do, so just git push, that's all I did. Alt-tab over to your repository, which you hopefully have there. Right now, it just says examples. If you refresh, you should see the index.php page in there as well, right? So now I want to see past changes. I want to see before index.php got put in. The way I can do that is up here where you see the link for 2 commits. That's the number of snapshots in time you've taken. If you click that, you can see our first commit says init, and our second commit says adding an index file for Heroku. You can also click the little link that it has over to the right, and it will show you all of your code changes. If I click on the one that we did for the index file, we can see the new code changes. Okay, so that's an easy way to tell what has changed. Now, because this is files that are brand new, all the code changes are green. If you modify something in that file and re-push, you will see that some of it is red, some of it is green. Any lines removed will be in red. Any new stuff will be in green. Okay? Cool. Let's mash this up with Heroku. Open up a new tab and navigate to Heroku.com. Don't spell it wrong because I'm pretty sure the spelled wrong one is a porno site. HEROKU.com. Super important. There you go. Heroku.com. Don't get flagged by Georgian servers. All right, let me log out so we're all looking at the same thing. Okay, so this is what the Heroku page looks like. We're going to create a brand new account, so you can literally just click sign up for free. And it is free. You actually get quite a bit for free. And if you pair up a credit card with it for verification, you get a lot of stuff for free. And it's very hard to blow past your free tier. Like, don't go do data mining. If you do data mining, you'll blow past it, but they stop you anyways. They shut it down. The only downfall to Heroku that I would point out, the way they save money is when your app is dormant, where nobody's actually accessing your app for longer than 30 minutes, it will shut the box off. So the whole virtual service just turns off. So the next time you navigate to the app, you have to wait for that cold start. So the whole box has to boot up again, the servers have to turn on. Once everything is up, then you get your app. It's about anywhere from 15 seconds to 30 seconds long. In the grand scheme of the web, that is a terrible website experience for a user. But for you, who's just using it as a development kind of thing, it's perfectly fine. There are ways around that. There's a service called Ping that literally will just contact the box every so often to stop it from shutting down, which I use for my wife's professional business site. So I don't pay for her site because it's all free through Heroku, and I just keep contacting it. You get 750 hours a month, which is the whole month, like as if you never turned off the box. So, but that's across all of your applications. Keep that in mind. So if you have multiple apps, that's 750 hours across all apps. So if all the apps are running all the time, then you will likely get a bill. So be careful. All right. So enter in your name, your last name, your email, company name if you happen to own a company, your role at your company. It's probably technology business manager, the country you're from, and the language you prefer to work in. Nope, does not. It does not. Now you are going to have to go. You are going to have to go to your email and confirm your Heroku. Once you're done, you're going to hit this page, only you're not going to have all of these current applications that are running. By the way, this scm.education is that app right there. Top 2068 system. As you can see, it is on. So you'll have to verify with your email. Now, as far as I know, Heroku also supports Java server pages, which means you can build Java web applications as well in Heroku and deploy them. Supports Ruby, obviously, Node, stuff like that. Tons of different things that you can utilize. When you guys do your MERN stack class or your mean stack class, which is advanced JavaScript frameworks, I think they call it, use Heroku. It's definitely handy for it. All right, just out of curiosity, how many people are at this page? How many people are still signing up? A few minutes to finish here. Make sure you choose a password you're going to remember. Write it down on a post-it, stick it to your laptop. I have to admit, Adam, it's got to make your life so much easier when their password's right posted on their laptop.
Yeah, and then oh my god, I had a person the other day who needed to see a picture of like a Git Fetch to be able to use it as like a pattern or something like
That's
that.
funny.
They're like, yeah, so put your finger in the middle and up one, and no wait, no, diagonal in the middle. I was like, oh my god, look at the picture.
To be fair, when I was looking to my work, I know like the muscle memory, I know for some purpose.
Yeah. Dude, I got one of those fancy like point or whatever, like POS terminals at a like Thai restaurant.
All right.
I could not do my name. I could not. It's like the letters.
All right, anybody still signing up? Nope. Awesome. Okay, so you should be at a screen that looks, who just signed up? Right. I'm trying to remember where we are. Click on data. Did you just navigate to this?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. Who's got like just a welcome screen? Awesome. Click on the create new app button. That's what I want you to click. I don't have it because I've already done so many. But it will look like, once you click it, it'll look like this. Create new app, and it should take you to this page. So, unlike GitHub, that will allow us all to have the repository name the same, you can't do that with Heroku because it creates an address. And I'm not sure if you knew this, but web addresses have to be unique. I'm pretty sure you probably figured it out. So we have to make sure this is unique. So what I would recommend doing is do comp 1006. Okay. See, somebody's taking it. I think it was me, but somebody's taking it. Comp 1006 dash and your student ID. So if you do, do dash and your friend's student ID. Super easy to remember. Just do your student ID, gives you a brand new unique. This URL is completely pointless anyways. If you decide that you want a vanity URL that's like seanmckinnon.ca, which does exist, you can actually assign that to a URL like a Heroku URL. Yeah. Once you've done that, don't add a pipeline. Once you've done that, that's for continuous integration. It gets a lot more sophisticated. Go ahead and create app. I mean, you can, but you're going to be on your own. And you'll hit this page. So this is, yes it does. This is our deploy page. I love your running commentary. It's my favorite thing. So this is our deploy page. You can see we have 3 different deployment opportunities here. Container registry, which is basically using Docker. I'm not sure if you guys have experience with Docker. GitHub or Heroku. We want GitHub. So if you click the GitHub one, it's going to give you an option to connect to GitHub. Now mine is already connected. Yours aren't, and I'm trying to remember how to. I don't remember this off the top of my head. Then we can see somebody's screen.
Just do it.
Yeah, click the connect to GitHub and then sign into your GitHub. So click connect to GitHub and sign into your GitHub. Once you've done that, you should see your GitHub name. I'll make this bigger. Okay, you should see your GitHub name. So connect to GitHub, and then you should see your GitHub name and be able to sign in. Somebody, oh, because you probably already change the last number. It actually doesn't really matter. GitHub. Scroll down. Click connect to GitHub and then sign in. Real good. Awesome. All right, so we have GitHub connected. Now you can either go searching for your repo name, or if you just click the search block, nobody's going to know what's happening. If you just click the search block, it'll load all the repositories. And you should see a list of repositories, which you probably have one or two at most. Find the repository we created and click connect. So once again, find the repository you created and click connect. And you'll see some dots. And then it will say the branch that it wants you to connect with is master. We haven't created any other branches, so that's fine. But there's one more step that I want to do. I want to make it that every time I push code, it immediately deploys from GitHub to Heroku and builds and produces my application. So any changes I make that I push to GitHub should automatically be seeable on my website, well, within 30 seconds, okay? The way I'm going to do that is by enabling automatic deploys. So I click the button, and now it's turned on. If for some reason that freaks you out, then don't enable it. The CI is continuous integration. That is a different thing. Fortunately, you guys don't learn about continuous integration. But the idea of continuous integration is it makes sure that all the things that need to be in place are in place before your application gets deployed. So if our application relied on some other things like Postgres servers and stuff like that, it would make sure all those are up before we finally were okay to deploy this. Down here it says deploy a GitHub branch. Even though we've enabled automatic deploys, we still have to deploy ours for the first time. After that, it'll just deploy on its own. So you click deploy branch. Give it a second, because we're all kind of hitting it at the same time. And if you scroll down, you'll see a little log window. And it's running through, setting everything up. Bam, your app was successfully deployed. Yours failed? Yeah, I'll take a look at how many failed. Just a few of you? Okay, we'll take a look at that in 1 second. So reasons why Heroku can fail. Broken PHP page is one. So if your page is broken, it will definitely fail. No default language can be detected. Show me your repository. Show me your repository. Not the repository. Because you don't have the index file in this folder. Yeah. So, like I was saying before, this is why it's so super important that you hear what I'm saying. inside VS Code, we created this index file at the root of lesson 5, and we did that because lesson 5 is our repository. This file has to exist in order for Heroku to know that we want to build a PHP application. If that file is missing, all it sees is folders, and it won't dig into the folders. It doesn't care. So if that index file is missing at the root of your repository, it's not going to work. It will fail. The way we know whether we did this correctly is if you go to your repo, you should see index.php within your repo. If it's not there, you need to create this file still. How many people are missing that file? That's what I thought. All the people whose app failed.
It went right into my example folder.
There you go. Okay.
Okay.
I got it over there. Put the code back in here. And then you have to reuse commit.
Okay, so once you have the file in place, you're going to have to redeploy. Don't click on comp 1006 because that's the repo. Scroll down. There's no file in the repo. Because when we deploy, it doesn't dig into these folders. It looks at this level. That's not it has to be in that repo. So if you go back to your code, like VS Code, and just drag that index.php out so it's at the same level as lesson 5. Yep. There you go. Now in here you have to git add dot. So now once you've done that, you have the index.php at the root. You need to follow these steps. Git add dot git commit -m quotes ASDF git just push because you didn't make any changes somewhere else. So git add dot git commit -m with your message, git push. And then that will push the index to the root. Make sure your index.php is at the root of your repository. Those of you that have a working repository, like you've already done that, if you navigate to Heroku, for some reason it's closed for me. Yeah, if you navigate to Heroku, wait, what did I call mine? My app? Oh, there it is. Click Open App in the top right-hand corner. It'll open your application and you should see this Git testing page. So once again, under the Heroku application, up in the top, there's an Open App button. If you click that, it should take you to this page, providing your index.php file and your deploy worked. Your deploy has to work for that page to be there. Looks like it's working to me. It's just you don't have any text there. Did you save the index.php page? Well, he wouldn't have a deployed app if it was. Oh, hers still deployed? Okay, yeah, no, you definitely need to make sure it's in there. If not, just navigate to /examples and you'll see it. No, then you didn't save. I'll make fun of you. Save it. No, just save it. Now you have to do git add. You have to do these. Git add, git commit, git push. Yeah. You have to redo everything. What? Go check and make sure you saved your page when you did your link. Okay, then go check Git status and see if you have any changes that haven't been pushed.
I'm killing Give it a minute. Give it a hot minute.
I want to make sure that everything.
It does take time for the deploy. Like, it can take 30
If we force it,
seconds.
it just does it right away, right?
It still will take time. So the way to know, there's an activity tab here. It will show you that something's in progress. If it's in progress, the deploy has not finished. The build hasn't finished. Yeah, so just wait. Yeah. Once it's deployed, just go to Open App, and then you should see your page. Okay, so just to note, if you click the link table of countries will be empty, right? And why is it empty? Because it doesn't have access to our database on our local machine. It can't reach out and grab that. In fact, it's trying to connect to localhost on Heroku. And it's looking for this database on Heroku, which doesn't exist. So we're going to give it a remote database, but that requires us to actually get our credentials and everything else. Now, because for the most part, the credentials for the MySQL instance that I'm going to give you guys is basically the same. The host we connect to, everybody's connecting to the same host. The username and the username and database are your student IDs prefixed by user underscore and DB underscore. So it's just your student IDs with your user underscore. However, the passwords are UUIDs, which are unique, universally unique identifiers, which I will need to provide you. All right, did you guys manage to get your stuff figured out over there? Yes? Emily, did you guys get your stuff figured out? Okay. Yeah? All right. I think what I'll do is I'll do a 15-minute break. During the 15 minutes, what I would like you to do is come up and see me during that time. Come get your password. And then it's about 10 characters, so be ready to write 10 characters. And then you can go back to your desk and you'll have your credentials. So, once again, everybody's good with the password thing for the test? It's query. All right. So your login credentials, I'll give you the host when we start, but your login credentials will be user underscore and your student ID. We just took it from Blackboard. And then DB underscore and your student ID. Okay? All right, let me stop my recording so I don't accidentally. All right, so Heroku is down, so we're just going to connect to the Workbench. All right, you guys ready? Sure? All right. Open up MySQL Workbench. Okay. So the database that I'm giving you is actually being served from AWS using their relational database service. You can sign up for your own relational database service through Amazon if you wanted to. It is free, but you will likely require a credit card to get it to work. So we're all going to share the same address, and trust me, this is a proof in concept more than anything else because I don't know if this is going to work. I'm hoping it will. Only because of how many connections we're going to have all in one go. Go. So create a new connection in MySQL Workbench. So you do that by clicking this little plus sign. So click the little plus sign, and you'll get this window pop up. The host name right here. So the host name, make sure you're seeing what I'm doing. The host name is that address. Sorry, I can't be simpler. And that is an O, not a 0, but it's lowercase, so that should be hopefully obvious. It's unfortunately a bit absurd. I know some of you rock Discord, so if one of you wants to be super nice and like put it in the Discord channel for people, that would be helpful. Or Slack or whatever. You're not changing. No, just wait for the rest of it. Yeah. So write down that URL inside your host.
We're gonna put it in underscore. Like we usually do it, but there you go.
See, I already see a spot mistake. Here's what I wrote.
It's
Well,
often happens.
let me know the line below.
That's the host name. Yeah. They're just ridiculous because they have like 2 billion bloody databases.
On there, yeah.
Yeah. It's only like a huge amount of the internet.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody still writing this out? Yeah? Okay, I'll give you a second longer. 1 second, that's all you got. Yeah, it's a bit of a ridiculous address for sure. Just as an afterthought, I should have copied it and put it in Blackboard.
Next class gets it.
I mean, yeah, exactly.
Next semester.
Next semester. All right, we good? Awesome. So the next piece should be fairly easy. So I'm going to take that address that I just did. I don't know why I didn't. Oh, it's probably still on my clipboard, actually. Nope, of course it isn't. Why would it be, right? So that goes where your host is. Leave port as 3306. Your username is user underscore. I wish I could make this bigger. And your student ID. Okay, whatever your student ID is, that is your username. Okay? So user underscore and your student ID. Not my student ID, your student ID. Okay? I'm going to put in my address, but you guys, or my username, but you guys have a different username. So it's user underscore and your student ID. Not the word student ID, your actual student ID. Okay? You need to set a default schema because you can only administer your own database. So you can't administer your buddy's database. It won't work. So you need to put your database in here. Your database is db underscore and your student ID. The number, yeah. Yeah, you can write it out alphabetically if you want to. TWO ZERO. Right? So write out your database name. So I will do mine, which is okay. Then I want you to click test connection. Mine successfully made the connection because I stored my password. Yours is going to prompt you for your password. Your password is the thing you either wrote down or took a picture of. You don't have a password?
I can grab it then.
No, man, you might as well grab it now.
Save password in vault.
Yeah, definitely say the password in the vault. It'll make your life easier. 200. Yep. So I was going to say there's more numbers than that. That's your password.
Come on.
Do you need your password? What's your student ID? 2004
308
308
06.
06. There you go. All right. All right. So what I would like you to call your connection, you can either call it AWS, but I would recommend calling it remote. So give it the connection name of remote. Okay? When you're done, go ahead and click OK. Did anybody's test fail? So that's cool because that tells me two things. It tells me, one, your credentials work, and two, 20 people can access the database at the same time, which I would hope from AWS, but you never know, right? Because it is one database, technically. It's one server that you guys are all connected to at the same time. Okay, cool. Let's open this thing up and we'll create a table inside of it. All right, so I have like all of your databases. Yeah. Yours did fail?
It's because everyone's trying to load it right now.
Did you get a credential failure? Wrong credentials? Your password.
Oh,
Make sure you get your password. Make sure you get your password in correctly. I did run a status check on them last night, and they were all connecting just fine.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he does.
If it fails again, guys, just send me an email letting me know what your credentials were, and then I'll repurpose new credentials for you. All right. Once you're in here, we need to connect to our, we need to create our country SQL. So let's go get our country SQL. So that is on lesson 3. So go back to your folder. You can also navigate to it by clicking on the W and go to www directory. Go to comp 1006, lesson 3. It's under examples, or no, maybe it's not lesson 3. Where did we create the SQL? Was it in the lab? The heck is this SQL? Oh, forget it. We'll just write it. Okay. First, type in use and then your database name. Okay, so mine is DBS McKinnon. Yours is DB underscore whatever your student ID is. We're not creating the database. So don't write create. Just use. I'm just using the database. And then we're going to create the table if not exists. Countries. Oh, does the bracket have to be right against the word countries? No, shouldn't matter. Our first field is going to be called ID. It'll be an integer of 11 characters. I'll be surprised if I remember all this. Oh snap, I did. The next field will be the name of the country, which will be a varchar of 200 characters and also not null. Description, I think, was the next one. Text. Let's just do 5,000 characters for it, and it can be null. And population, which is an int of 11 characters and cannot be null. And then we'll leave out the create and update, but we'll put in primary key ID. I'm pretty sure that's how it would be done. So let us create a brand new table with an ID column, a name, a description, and a population column. The ID column will auto increment and will be our primary index. Once you've done that, click the little lightning bolt. And I get a warning because I've already created this table. You guys should get the use DB green light, and then you should get a green light for the table creation. You can also see under the schemas your database. If you go to your database, you should see tables next to it. You can also refresh just so you can see the tables. If you click the arrow beside tables, you should see countries in there. Were you not able to create, Emily?
It creates it, but it just doesn't load any of the schemas or anything. It just says it can't be fetched.
If you do a refresh, it still says that?
Yeah, it gives me an error when it refreshes that it just error coded schema content. But it works.
But you were able to create?
Yeah.
Let's just go with that. let's see what occurs here.
It doesn't seem to be interfering with it. So.
We'll find out in a second when we try to actually connect. Yeah. All right. So in order to make our application work not only with our remote credentials, but also with our local credentials, we're going to have to use something called environment variables to get this to work. What environment variables are is they're variables set on your computer. Like they physically exist on your machine under your user account. That's super important to understand. They're only for you. So if you have more than one user on your computer, they have their own set of environment variables. Granted, some of the variables might be the exact same, but you both have your own set. They are completely unique to you, right? Ways we can see our environment variables. If you open up PowerShell in administrator mode, you can actually view your environment variables. Wish this thing would remember the friggin' settings that I put in it, instead of like changing them each time. There we go. So I want to look at all the environment variables on my computer. I type in ls env : and I hit enter, and that is the list of all my environment variables. So this is the variable name on the left, the value is on the right. So for example, all users profile, chances are all of you have that variable, and it's exactly the same value, but it is unique to your computer. ls space env : enter. And you should get a big list of environment variables.
Click on Mac, it's print ENV.
For you, it might be print.
I think that's what it's saying standard for.
Yeah, you can also echo them out individually as well. But yeah, it's a little trickier. Yeah.
Print ENV one word, I think.
Okay. Print ENV supposedly works on that. So these are at your system level. So it's important to understand that the environment variables exist at 3 different levels. System is the base level. If it's not set at the other 2 levels, it will find it in system. Okay? The next level is the Apache level. That's our web server. If we have any of these variables defined in Apache, that variable will be delivered first before the system one. So Apache, then system. Programming level is the first check it does. At the programming level is where you've defined it in your code, set the value in your code, and it checks there first, and we'll use that first. Because we're constrained for time, I recommend looking through the lesson plan for this week, and I walk you through a little chunk of code to write so that you can see the differences between the 3 levels and how it overwrites each other. Okay, so make sure you take a look at that. Suffice to say that we are going to define some environment variables so that we can basically create 2 sets. One that's for our local environment only, so that those variables get used on our local machines, and then a set for Heroku, which we actually define in the Heroku application. This will mean that we can use 2 MySQL instances. Our local version that is run on WAMP when we're locally developing, and our production version that is sitting in Heroku. 2 different databases, totally excluded from each other, and we can access both. In order to do that, we're going to create a new file. So I want you to open up, if you haven't got it open, make sure you open up. Why did I go this way? This is a stupid long way. Let's take the shortcut, www directory. Open up your lesson 5 folder if you don't already have it open with VS Code. It does this to me so often. Click, then right click, then open with code. If you don't click, it just opens the whole directory, like everything. There we go, that's better. All right, on the right here, you're going to create 2 new files. The first file you're going to create is going to be called .env.php. That naming convention is just a common naming convention for environment variable configuration files. You don't have to name it that. You could just be like my environment variables. Doesn't really matter. The second file we're going to create is .git ignore. And that has to be named that way. What your git ignore file will allow you to do is basically define files that you don't want to be pushed to GitHub. Why do you think we wouldn't want to push our environment variables to GitHub? Security, right? We don't want people knowing our local environment variables. Granted, it would take a lot for them to access our machine, but if they did and they knew the local environment variables, it would give them a leg up on the security. We want to make sure that our .env file is not getting pushed to our GitHub repo. We want to keep all security credentials out of our GitHub repo entirely. So in your git ignore, you're just going to add one line, .env.php, the name of the file. So that will now be ignored. It won't get added to the repository. Just to show you that that's true, I'm going to open up terminal. I'm going to type in git status. Oh, thank you so much. If the .env file was to be included, we should see a change, right? The only change I have is the git ignore file itself, but the .env file has been entirely excluded. It's not added to our changed files. Okay? So now in the .env, we can go ahead and define some environment variables. It's a PHP file, so let's create our PHP block. And the way we define the environment variables is kind of obnoxious. I'm not sure why this function works like this. It's kind of stupid. But it's put env is the name of the function. It takes a string, and the string is exactly the same way you would define a variable in your system if you were to define it on the command line. So I don't understand why it's not just 2 arguments, the name of the variable and the value, but it's not. So it looks like this. It's really stupid. We're going to do db user as our name. And then your user will be the local user for your computer. So mine is root. Yours is probably root as well.
Does the user have to be completely capitalized, or?
It doesn't have to be. It just makes it easier. That's generally the way environment variables. If you look at the environment variables that were listed, they're all caps, right? Because they're constants, essentially, right? Variable is actually kind of the wrong word. DB user, we're also going to create DB pass. And this one, for most of you, will be blank. Some of you will be equal to root. If it's blank, you still need DB pass. You just don't give it a value. But you still need the variable to exist. Otherwise, our connection will blow up. The next put in env will be our host. And I'm going to do db host equals localhost. And then the last one I'm going to define is our database. Put env, and I'm just going to say db equals, and our database currently has been less than 3. And that is our env file. So this file, anytime you want to add new environment variables, you'll put them in this file if they need to be used locally. So this is for your local environment files or environment variables. So I'm going to write a comment above. Local environment variables. hard lesson to get through in 3 hours. It's just, there's so many moving parts. Okay. This file currently exists there, but we need to actually have these credentials at the top of our other files in order to work with these variables. The way PHP works is even though we have this file here, right, and it's defined, unless you load it into the file you're currently working in, none of that stuff's available to you, right? It's just sitting on inside its own file. It's like in Java, if you were to create an application and not tell it to require another file, you just put it in the directory and hope for the best. Wouldn't work, right? Same kind of idea. This actually needs to be required by our other files in order to be loaded, just the same as you would in Java or JavaScript or any of those. So let's do that now. So we're going to first take a look at let's do insert because that's the first one we need to do. We're going to write this once, and then we're just basically going to copy and paste it everywhere it needs to go. So we're going to write, you can use require or include, doesn't really matter. We're going to write require, and we're going to use a relative URL. So right now we are in an examples file. We actually need to move up a directory to get at that .env because it's actually outside of our directory. So I'm going to go ... which says move up a directory / .env.php. So that'll require the files from the directory above. The files. Require, include once, and require once. We're going to talk about all 4 of those next week in depth, and I'm going to show you how they work because we have to do a whole bunch of fun stuff with it. But suffice to say, all it does, it copies the contents of the file you told it to require and literally pastes it where you called it, right? So right now, it's the equivalence of if we just copied all the contents of .env and just pasted it at line 2. That's basically what's occurred. Now we need to update this connection string because this connection string no longer works. So we're going to go get env, and then we provide it the name of our environment variable. So get env db host for the first one for the host name. If you don't like that, because I know it looks a little janky, you can create variables like host equals dbenv and then put those variables in, but I feel like that's a bit redundant. Same with the username, get env db user. Null will be get env. Whoops. db pass. And lesson 3 will be get env db. We're going to need to copy these 2 lines so that our whole application works. We have 2 minutes. So copy those 2 lines so that you have them. This code is already pushed to GitHub as well, and the GitHub link is online, so you can see this code. So if you do get lost, don't worry, the code is sitting in GitHub. Okay, so once you've copied those 2 lines, you're going to jump over to, let's go to edit.php. And you guys don't have that because I did that with another student. There we go, we'll get rid of that. Copy over top, like highlight over top the connection details and paste those 2 lines in place. So you're replacing the connection with a require and the new connection string. You're going to do that in insert.php, edit.php, update.php, right? So I'll do this in update as well. Delete.php as well. I realize this is going a little quick. I do apologize. and table.php. And then we're done. Well, we're done that. We need to do one more thing. We need to get rid of that big bloody help block. There we go. Sorry about that. So you're going to put that in insert, edit, update, delete, and table. 5 places, right? Everywhere we've done a connection. So this is cool. This will work locally now. This will work with our local stuff. And we can see that if we were to navigate to localhost, right? /comp 1006. I go to lesson 5, table of countries. You can see I have my tables of countries still. Everything's still working. It's just now feeding it from that .env file, right? However, I want this to work remotely in Heroku. So I'd like you to log into Heroku. We should be able to change the environment variables even if Heroku is down. So access your app. And I want you to go to the settings tab. In the settings tab, if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see reveal config vars. Click that. That's where we're going to define our environment variables in Heroku. And obviously, to make this work, the environment variables need to have the same name as the local environment variables do. That's super important, right? Makes sense, right? So the first one is the key. So the key is db_host, no quotations. The value will be that Amazon link. Yeah, I know, geez. The easiest way to get that is if you jump over to MySQL Workbench, right-click on the connection you just created, and choose Edit Connection. You can grab the link from right there. Just grab that link, jump back over to Heroku, and paste it in place. And then click Add. You have to click Add or it won't take. Copy it from your Workbench. If you right-click on the connection and choose Edit Connection, you should be able to grab the host. So you see where I am here, Lindsay? If I right-click, choose Edit Connection, you can see the host name there, and then you just grab the host name. So in Heroku, it's under Settings, Reveal Config Vars, and then create your first key with db host, that value, and then click Add. Those of you that are past that point, you can move on to the next one, which is db_user, and that is the database username that you've been using that's in that configuration, right? So it'll be user_ with your student ID. I'm going to put a min. The next one, I'm sure you'll understand why I'm not going to add it in front of you. But the next one will be db_pass, and that will be the password I provided you. And I'm just going to write gobbledygook, which is not my password. That's it. That's right. And you may have concerns about a raw password going into your environment variables, but you're kind of at the lowest level you can possibly be where you should put a raw password. At that point, if that password gets compromised, you're fucked anyways because they're now in your machine. They've got root control and you're done. There's no coming back from that. So if they've got that password, you're already screwed. So it doesn't matter. Right? So don't worry about your raw password. All right, DB, just DB, and the name of your database. So DB_ and your student ID. And a lot of people forget to click Add here, and they just navigate away from the page, and then nothing happens. You have to click Add, otherwise it won't take. Incidentally, this edit is a bit misleading. You can edit the value, you cannot edit the key. So if you screwed up on a key, you just have to delete it. That's all you can do, really. So now notice once again that these environment variables match our local. And the reason why we're doing that is because we configure in two different locations, but our code uses the same environment variables. Makes our lives a lot easier, right? Than having to try to basically say, does this exist? Okay, well then use this one, because that's silly, right? Just use the same environment variable settings. All right, last thing before we go, we just want to push our code. I'll do it from PowerShell because I know some of you are having issues with the one that's built in. So just make sure you're in the correct directory. Let me make sure I grab the right one here. By the way, if you press up, you can cycle through commands you've written before on your keyboard. So if you type in git status, we have a delete.php and edit.php, insert.php, and table.php that are all changed. And we have a .git ignore that currently is not being tracked. To stage all of these changes and start tracking git ignore, we're just going to do git add dot, and now all of that is getting tracked and staged. So git add dot is what I did here. We need to commit it, so we take a snapshot of everything that's changed. So git commit -m unified connection strategy. Basically fancy words for same connection details, but different things. Fancy speak. There's fancy speak. Good? I'm going to hit enter. All right. 6 files changed, 12 insertions, which is not wrong because we created 2 new lines, right? No deletions. We didn't actually remove anything. We also added a new file called git ignore. That's why it says create mode. Next step, Git Pull, just in case there's any changes online. Last step, Git Push. And now it's going to iterate through all of our stuff, compress it, compile it, and push the differences. This is the old key pointing to the new key.
So you have to do git pull instead of git push first because in case
There's code changes. Exactly. Yeah. If your friend has made changes, you got to grab those first.
Okay.
That's the considerate thing to do.
Okay.
You could always just git push -f on them.
Yeah.
It's just me doing it. I can just do git push.
Because more than likely, unless you have MPD, you're likely haven't done changes that you don't know about.
Yeah. Okay.
Multiple personality disorder, because you know about that. Rosie did it, I swear. Cool. Okay. Now, I know yours likely is not working for a lot of you, which is totally fine. We'll deal with that next week, actually. But if I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to open the app. Takes 30 seconds to boot because it has to go from cold start. We haven't been doing anything, so it's likely off. So it's literally booting up. Once it boots up, starts the Apache server. Once it starts the Apache server, Heroku's still down. So unfortunately, Heroku's still down, so I can't really show you the modifications that have happened. Suffice to say that we are at a good point that next week when we get here, we'll jump right into that and start working with that. So that obviously leads to a problem. Your lab for today, should you choose to accept it, your lab for today is deploying code, objective to reinforce today's learning, obviously. Submit tomorrow by midnight. I want.
Do it by midnight.
So here's the problem. 10 points for GitHub link, 10 points for working Heroku application, 10 points for working code base on Heroku. Well, obviously, 1 and 2 are not working. And that's no fault of yours, that's Heroku. So if you do get all that in, I will give you 30 points for a working GitHub link, which you guys should already have because we already did it. And I will give you bonus 10 if you can get these two to do what they're supposed to do. So you can get 50 points on this. You only need 30, you can't get 50. So you might have to do some of your own troubleshooting. That's the only thing, which is something you should be embracing as computer programmers. Yeah.
It's due today, actually.
Tomorrow by midnight, isn't it?
No, it's due to the
Ha! All right, I'll fix it. You know what? I'll be even nicer.
Yeah, the next week, right?
You have till Friday.
Oh.
Settle down.
Doing that anything.
You have till Friday. You it's the GitHub link you currently have, which is like 10 seconds of your life. It's those other two you have till Friday to see if you can figure them out. Yeah. No worries.
What is code base?
Code base? It's the code you wrote.
So just like